Hey everyone, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. So today we're going to look at the RG350P one more time. So I already unboxed and gave my initial impressions of this a couple days ago, but I've had a couple days now to kind of play around with the interface, get a little bit more used to it. And so this video today is going to show some of the things that I've done to make little tweaks just to make the system a little bit more enjoyable as I'm playing through with it. Now, one note is the fact that I'm still using the irregular firmware that ships with it because it's important to me to figure out how it's going to play outside of the box for everybody as they're picking it up. Now, other people are working on firmware updates. They've already kind of downloaded it and scraped around inside. Unfortunately, Amberneck has not released the firmware for people to actually start developing with it, which is unfortunate, but they've said that they are looking into doing that. They want to clean the code up first. So at the end of this video, I'm also going to give some pros and cons about the device. Just after having a few days and being more familiar with it, I think that I can kind of make a little bit better of a judgment in terms of what I like and what I don't like. So look forward to that in the end. But for now, let's actually go into the settings and see some of the tweaks I made. So the first thing is I don't like the input controls in certain emulators. So for example, on Mario, the jump button is the A button and B is the run button. And that's fine. That's kind of similar to the NES, but I personally like the Super Mario All-Stars way, which is with Y as being the run button and B as being the jump button. And so here we're going to go into inputs and controls in the settings here in RetroArch, and you hit L3, R3 to get into this. And then you can actually go and configure the actual button. So for example, this bottom button, the B button, I'm going to change that to be the A button because I want that to be my jump button. And then for example, this button, the Y button, I'm going to change that to be the B button. And that's going to allow me to run with that button and jump with the other. And I decided on the side too, I can also make the other ones turbo. So in certain games where that would be, helpful. So for example, let's make this one turbo A. And then we'll make the next one Turbo B. And that's it. So we can jump right back into the game and see how it plays. But yeah, that's really all you need to do. You can go into each emulator and kind of figure it out. But you can see here, I'm jumping using that button, and then I can use the Y button to do the running as well. And to me, that's just a little bit more comfortable as I'm holding it in my hand. And same thing here, I'm just pulling up Mario 3 to give another example. Same control scheme. I really like it this way. Maybe it's just from the old Super Mario All-Stars days, but I just kind of prefer the jump that way. Okay, so let's look at changing the aspect ratio of the screen itself. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I don't like that it's widescreen since a lot of these classic consoles were 4:3, which is a more square kind of resolution. So we're going to go up here, change it to 4:3 in the aspect ratio settings, and you can see here it gives you black bars on the sides. And I prefer it this way. It just feels a little bit less smashed, And I incorrectly said 16:9 in my last video. The 3:2 is the ratio for this Amberneck RG351P. But you can see here the black bars don't really bother me that much. Unfortunately, it kind of just makes those bezels bigger, and it makes the screen feel a little bit smaller. But at the same time, it just feels a little bit better in terms of just having that right resolution and not too crazy. So I don't want to spend a lot of time comparing screens since I did that already, but here's the RG350M, and you can see it not only is 4:3 natively, but it also has twice the pixel density because it's 640 by 480 as opposed to 320 by 480, which is this screen here. And you can see, just looking at the text here, look at Yoshi's house. You see how some of it's squished a little bit? It's because it's using half pixels vertically, whereas this one, it's just even across the board. Now, it's really hard to convey this in video, but it really makes a big difference to me and my naked eye, and it bothers me, to be honest. It's something where I've used some retro devices before, some older ones, and they just played kind of crappy and everything looked kind of bad, and that's what it feels like with this. So another thing I tried out was the OTG adapter on top to see if I could have, for example, a second controller come in, or even just control the first player with a controller. And unfortunately, it wasn't working for me. I tried all sorts of different controllers and schemes, and none of them worked. I think I need to dig more into the settings for that one. On top of that, in the Emulec settings, it has Bluetooth options, but it doesn't work. Like, I don't think there's actually a Bluetooth antenna in this device. They just haven't cleaned up the settings. So another thing you can do in the settings, you can actually change which systems show up when you first start up the game, which is very convenient. On top of that, you can also change which systems show up in the first place. You can go in here and you can say, for example, I'm not going to play this system, and you can uncheck it, which is nice. You know, another way to do it is just delete all the ROMs out of your SD card, but this is just a nice way to kind of curate your menu. And so also in the system settings, you can change the brightness. And I haven't found a hotkey to do this, but you basically go into system settings and change your brightness. You can also see your battery percentage in the information tab. So one of the nice things is the sleep function. I didn't mention this in the first video, but you basically just tap the power button and it works fine. And I tried this where I turned it off for 10 hours and came back and I had only lost 1% of battery life. So that's pretty handy. So let's talk a little bit about remapping the hotkeys themselves. So you can go into the hotkey settings, and then you can actually pick, you go into inputs, and then you go all the way down to hotkeys, and you can pick the specific buttons you use to toggle in and out of RetroArch, or how to quit a game, or how to load a save state. You can do all those yourself. So as opposed to having to hit L3, R3, you can change them. And I'll do a guide about this later of all the RetroArch things you can do, but I just wanted to give you an idea that you're not stuck with the L3, R3 options. Okay, so let's talk about the network card for a little bit. So a network antenna was built into the original RG351, and they found that it made a noise because they hadn't insulated the speaker cable, and it basically lays right on top of the antenna, and because of that, it makes a noise every time you use the Wi-Fi antenna. It's not huge or loud or anything, but they decided instead that they were going to just take the Wi-Fi antenna out altogether, and as you can see here on their page from their official store on AliExpress, they're now offering an OTG adapter as well as a Wi-Fi USB adapter. So you're going to have to basically live with the dongles if you want the connectivity, which actually is pretty neat, and we'll go over that in a minute. Or you know, I got lucky and I got one of the Wi-Fi modules. I'm going to have to open up my device and actually insulate the speaker wire itself, so that way I can get rid of the sound. But it's not terrible, and I'll give you an example of it here in a minute. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to show you why it is that things are kind of having an issue with the Wi-Fi, and they drove down the price. So it was $110, the one I paid for, but now they're selling it for $99. So it's kind of a win. You get for $99 the device plus these two module adapters, which is pretty cool. So you go into network settings, you turn on Wi-Fi, and then you add your Wi-Fi address and password. You wait a minute, and then it'll connect up, and it'll actually show you an IP address. So you can use that IP address to actually tunnel into the device itself, so you can add games wirelessly. So here I am with WinSCP, and I'm just going in and I'm typing in under SFTP, which is an SSH, right? I'm going into the host name, I'm typing in that IP address I saw before, and then the username is root, and the password is MUELEC with no capitals, and I'll put that down below so you can see it. And then you just hit yes here, and that'll give you full access to your device. And so you can see here, this is the SD card. So you go into the ROMs folder, and there are where all the games are stored. So you can go in there, delete games, add games. So let me show you. Here's the Game Boy Color folder, and let me pull up a game, and I'll show you how quickly this moves over. And this is a 2 meg game, and like that, instantly, right? Pretty cool. So a lot faster than the old way on the RG350, and wireless, which is nice, but you'll have to use a dongle, unfortunately. So let me show you how it sounds. So for example, I'm going to go in here and download a new theme for MUELEC, and I've cranked the volume up here so you can really kind of hear what it sounds like. But as soon as I push it, you'll hear there's this crackling sound. So let me just let you hear it. So yeah, it's not the end of the world, but that's what they didn't like, and that's why they took out the Wi-Fi antenna. Okay, so if you don't want to go the wireless route, you can still just take out the SD card and work with that. So you have to take that sticker off, which is a pain. But then you can see here, the SD card itself is one of those generic SD cards that came with the RG350. So you're probably going to want to replace this anyway. I'll build a guide for that later, but for now, let's just show you how to get games on and off. So when you open it up, you'll see there's actually two folders. There's an EmuElec drive, and then there's also the games drive. So you go into the games drive, and there you will see your ROMs folder. And in here is where you want to make changes. So this is not a very consistent method. You can see here that the Dreamcast games are all sorts of different file types. There's GDI, there's CDI, there's CHD files. It's all over the place, which is kind of unfortunate. And I mentioned in my previous video how Genesis and Game Gear and Mega Drive are all confusing. So if you open up one of the games that's in the Genesis folder, you see that it's a GG file, which means it's a Game Gear game. But then when you go into the Mega Drive folder, you see it's a .bin, which is a Genesis game. So you're going to want to clean this up and basically add your own games and whatnot to it. So let's look at actual gameplay. So here's the Nintendo 64 running, and this is through the typical standard settings here, but you can see it's pretty slow. This really is an indication to me that we as a community need to tweak the software settings to get it to run better. So it's a work in progress, but unfortunately it's not great. And you can see here with this game as well, it's slow. It's almost at half speed at this point. So hopefully some of the software gains we can make over time as the system becomes open source and we can work through it, hopefully some of those things will make it a little bit easier to play Nintendo 64 games. The real hope here is that the community will just kind of cobble together and figure out what we can do to make things better. Some games run fine, like this game right here, because the pixels are kind of small. It's a bit of a puzzle game. This one ran fine. I didn't have any issues with slowdown. I mean, you see tiny little frame dips, but it's not the end of the world. I think it's just fine. Okay, so moving on to Super Mario 64, this one is really apparent to me how that low resolution scaling is just it's not doing it for me. This 320 by 480 resolution just kind of looks terrible to me. One, you can see here just the different sizes in the screens themselves. When I add that 4:3 aspect ratio, the screen is much smaller on the RG351, unfortunately. Now look at the text here, as well as just kind of look at the polygons, and you can see the text on the bottom here. It isn't very sharp or clear. It just kind of looks a little bit mismatched, and that's because of those half pixels. We go in and look at a 640 by 480 display, and it looks great. And I know I keep belaboring this point, but it is very, very important to me, because if I'm playing a game like this, it feels to me a little bit like hot garbage. Like I'm not enjoying the experience here. The castle's all wonky because of the pixelation. Overall, it just doesn't feel very good. It feels like a run-down version of the game I'm used to. And then it's night and day when I pull up a 640 by 480 display. It's such a more fun experience, and it's really hard to place this, and the video doesn't capture it quite as well as it does to the naked eye, but you can see here on the Dreamcast as well. Let's turn it on and show you what it actually looks like, and it's kind of pixelated. This game runs slow. You can see it's only at 20 frames a second, and you can feel that, and I think it's about at 2/3 speed basically. But you can see, just take a look at that pixelation on the legs and stuff. And then let me show you the 640 by 480. It's like a remastered version. You know what I mean? Like, it's totally different, and it's so hard to kind of explain. But at the end of the day, I'd really just want to caution people to consider that this screen is probably going to disappoint you. I mean, that's how I'm feeling when it comes to it. And unfortunately, the software may not be able to overcome this in any way because just the amount of pixels that we're working with. Now let me try, let's add some frame skip in here. So this is the Retroid Pocket with frame skip of 1, and you can see it's running faster. It's not at full speed yet, you know what I mean, but it's pretty close, and it feels good. I like the way that it's controlling at this point. Let me try it with the RG351. So same thing, frame skipping set to 1, start up the game again. And same, it's a little jittery. That kind of comes with frame skipping, right? But it feels good. So I would say this game in particular, which is one of the hardest to play that I've noticed, with a frame skip of 1, it becomes playable to me. And you can see if you look at the FPS, it's at 17.12, and then on the Retroid Pocket in the background, it was at 17.91. Very similar in terms of their speeds. So here's Unreal Tournament. This is a game that would not play on the Retroid Pocket 2, but you can see here the graphics are fine. The other one was glitching out. I couldn't tell where I was or anything else like that. This one seems to be working just fine. So that's a bonus. I appreciate that. And then here is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 on the PS1. This is a game I've always had a little bit of slowdown on in my RG350 devices. So this one's running great, perfectly, almost 60 frames per second. Very, very solid. And so I'm really happy about the fact that some of these harder games, for example here with Bloody Roar 2, they run just fine. They have tiny little dips, like 1 or 2 frames a second, but it's not something that you're really going to notice. In general, PSX gameplay is really great on this. Unfortunately, the screen just doesn't look great. Another thing that works with this is they have like what they're calling 3D vibration, basically, and there's a little bit of a rumble feature on it. So right here, when the elevator landed here on Chrono Cross, I got a little bit of a bump. Right, it's not implemented in a lot of games, but it's there. Okay, so let's try out PSP. So this is Jack and Daxter here, and this is running at 0 frame skip and at 1x resolution. And you can see here, it's just unplayable, right? And that's very similar to how it is on the Retroid Pocket 2. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna crank up the frame skip. I'm gonna give it a frame skip of 2 here. Okay, and it's playing and it feels at just about a normal speed. But just like what I've done with the Retroid Pocket 2 with frame skip 2 on this as well, to me it's not an enjoyable experience. It just doesn't feel great. I don't appreciate the way it just kind of feels a little bit too hiccupy, And so let's do the same thing with a frame skip of 2 on Wipeout Pulse, and it also is not playing very well. One, it's still completely slow, and on top of that, it just doesn't feel good. It's hard to control because of the frame skipping. It's unfortunate. I really like this game, but I know this is one that's hard to emulate, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of how it's working, pushing the hardware to the max. Here's Ratchet and Clank, same thing, frame skip of 2, and it just feels all jerky and weird, and unfortunately, it's just not very fun to play. Now, you never know, they might make improvements to this emulator, or they might, kind of streamline some efficiencies here, and we might see better emulation down the line. But as it stands right now, I think that PSP and Dreamcast are both features that are available, but at the end of the day, they're not something that you're going to have very faithful recreation. So one more game I promised is Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. This is one that's always hard to emulate because of the Super FX chip inside, and so you can see here the frames are just dipping all over the place. And unfortunately, although it is relatively playable, I don't find it that enjoyable because there is a lot of frame drops and stuff. So I mean, this is across the board. Most emulators have a hard time with this, but I really just wanted to give you an idea that this isn't going to solve all the problems for some of those lower end games. Unfortunately, it's just not going to fix everything. Okay, one last game. So this is the Nintendo DS Metroid Prime Hunters, and the reason why I want to show this is because there is some screen tearing in this game, and that's unfortunate. This is using a drastic emulator. And that's an indication to me that the video settings have not been locked in correctly. So maybe there's going to be an opportunity for us down the line to fix this through the settings. I'm going to need some time to figure that out and obviously consult with the rest of the community and figure out if somebody else found any sort of tricks. But as it stands right now, it's not really working. Okay, so let's go over some of the pros of this device. So number one, battery life is great. Like it seems to be, I don't know about the full 8 hours that they're promoting, but it seems to work very well. I really like the sleep mode. I think the sleep mode is probably one of the best functions because it really doesn't drain the battery down. It's pretty good. I like the hardware. I like the feel of the buttons. It just feels good in the hand and whatnot. It's a powerful system, much more than the 350, and so it allows you to play PS1 games perfectly. I do like some of the network functions on top of being able to add games, wirelessly, and you can also add, retro achievements and things like that. And then also Game Boy Advance games work really, really well. So let's get into the cons. So the big con is the 3:2 screen aspect ratio. It distorts most of the games, and then you have to add a 4:3 and force it in RetroArch, which basically creates a smaller screen, unfortunately. So you're losing that screen real estate, basically for anything other than the Game Boy Advance and the PSP, which is just kind of a bummer to me. Pixel density, also same issue, so it's 320 by 480. So because of that, you're not getting that full 640 by 480 resolution you may be used to with other classic consoles. So unfortunately, it's just not ideal for the setup and the games they're actually playing. You know, unless you really love Game Boy Advance, this is really going to be disappointing to you. The software itself, I'm not too concerned about it, but I wanted to list it here. It's not perfect. You have to go in and make some tweaks. I'll write some guides up soon as I get more and more familiar with it, but as it stands right now, the software is not perfect. We've talked about it in depth, but the Wi-Fi issue, you know, the antenna is missing in action at this point, which is unfortunate, and you're going to have to use a series of dongles instead. And then no HDMI output. That's a big thing for me because I like to use that for my recording, and it may not be a big thing for others, but for me in particular, it means that I'm going to have to show you my hands all the time when I'm playing this device, as opposed to tunneling in through HDMI into my computer and then making it nice and pretty. And then finally, even though it says there is Bluetooth in the settings, there's actually no Bluetooth capability as far as I could tell within the device itself. I went online, checked the spec sheets. I don't see any mention of Bluetooth. So unfortunately, that's not an option either, which I really wasn't going to miss. But the fact that the Retroid Pocket 2 has Bluetooth built in and it works pretty well, it just kind of makes it a negative, unfortunately. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'm going to take a pause from these kind of videos where I'm reviewing hardware and kind of telling you my thoughts. I want to get back to making guides. I want to show you exactly how to do specific things for these devices. So give me a couple days. I'm going to kind of run through, make some improvements to the software, and then I'm going to share them with you both on my site and on this YouTube channel. So please stick around and check that out later. I'd love it if you liked and subscribed if you found this helpful. Leave a comment if there's any specific guides you'd like me to tackle. It takes time for me to do this, so if you can leave your comment below and then leave a like if you see someone else's comment that you agree with, that's really going to help me kind of make future content. So I really appreciate that. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. Happy gaming.